The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
14:20 in the morning, 14 minutes and 20 seconds where the sports talk to get you through your daily commute. Hot takes, recaps, best bets, and a little humor to get your day going in the right direction. Sit back, grab your coffee, and let's get into it. 14:20 in the morning for the September 11th, 2023. Today's show is brought to you by SeatGeek.com. The SeatGeek app. Use promo code 1420POD at SeatGeek.com today and save yourself $20 on your first purchase of football tickets, baseball tickets, whatever you might go into. Play a preseason hockey starting right around the corner. So lots going on in the sports world. Remember, we are part of the Belly Up Media Network. Go to bellyupsports.com and check out all of their great articles and other podcasts, such as Crap Brewed Sports, the Corner Booth podcast, and one of my favorites on the network, the Sports Stove podcast. It's great to listen to Vince on a weekly basis over there at the Sports Stove podcast. And remember, thank you very much for listening to our show each and every day here from 1420 World Headquarters. Lots going on over the weekend, so I didn't have a chance to get on the airwaves. It's one of those things. So Monday morning, we'll get Dave's on later on tonight, but we'll get to 1420 in the morning. Right now, it's funny the way pitching has changed over the years and the way the perception of pitching has changed over the years and how pitchers are used a lot more, a lot less nowadays compared to how they used to be back in the day when Nolan Ryan was throwing the 190 pitches a night and going on it, and Pedro Martinez was lasting 140 pitches in playoff games. Everything's just a lot different now. Whether it's better or worse, that's up for debate here on the show, and I hope you guys get back to us at 1420sports@gmail.com or comment in the comment section below. But you always got to get a laugh out of two situations that happened over the weekend. The first one on Friday night with the Seattle Mariners. They were in Tampa Bay Rays. They're in a big playoff spot. We talked about it earlier last week where the Seattle Mariners were playing some great baseball. Been struggling a little bit as of late, but they were in Tampa over the weekend, and they were going into the game, the seventh inning, I believe it was, on Friday night with a 4-2 lead. George Kirby was on the mound, pitching whatever. He had 2 or 3 hits going on pitching another great game. He's a great pitcher, a really good young starter for the Mariners. But anyways, he went in. He thought he was done. Went out in the seventh. He got the one out, gave up a double, and then a home run. Then he was pulled to make the game 4-4. His post-game comments is more what brought, because a baseball game is a baseball game, but not this time of year where wins and losses are so important and so crucial. I mean, they are at all times of the year, but right now they get magnified a lot more. But George Kirby, he made some comments after the game that he said basically, I didn't think I was going to be going back out. I'm disappointed I was out there after 90 pitches. I thought I was done. I thought my night was over. I didn't think I should be out there. And he got stung quite a bit by some old time pitchers and said that came back and said a lot of things. The next day, Kirby apologized to his manager, Scott Service, and he was one of those things where he said, he apologized. He wished he wasn't out there. He said on and on and on. The one that got me when he said he wished he wasn't out there, that was the worded improperly, whether it was the heat of the moment, how he said it, how it was the emotion. Don't let emotions make decisions for you. And sometimes, you say things you don't mean in the heat of the moment. Maybe it's one of those situations, but to say he wished he wasn't out there, he didn't think he needed to go anymore. That's kind of a bad look for George Kirby. Like I said, whether he meant it or not is another thing, but the pitch you got put out there, you probably weren't told between innings that you weren't going back out there. So you got to be ready to go, and you got to be ready to make some pitches. And if you weren't ready to go, say something to your manager so they can get somebody up in the bullpen, which they probably did. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, say that I was watching the vaunted Mariners Tampa Bay Rays game on Friday night, but it's one of those things you read about the next day. And the way he got stung by a lot of ex-pitchers, one being Roger Clemens, was kind of a shocking that these guys would come out and say something. Another guy was Jared Weaver, who came out and said something. These guys were horses. There's no doubt back in the day, these guys would throw 250 plus innings and whatever a year. Kirby's had a pretty decent start to his career. He goes in, night out. He throws a lot of innings, plays hard, plays a lot of things, but maybe this is one of those moments getting late in the season and you run your mouth a little bit and you say things you don't really mean. And then you get caught in it in the media. And then when old time guys decide to become keyboard warriors with Clemens, who should probably shut his yap because he had a lot of innings in his career that were aided by some substances, I guess, because if you look at the stat lines, we try not to do that here very much at the 1420 World Headquarters, 1420 in the morning. But if you go to the stat lines at this point in his career, George Kirby has actually pitched more innings in his first 2 years of service in the major leagues than Roger Clemens has in his first 2 years of major league service. It was the comments that were brought about that probably just irked Roger Clemens, the old rocket, to say what he did. Clemens went to Twitter. He said, it wouldn't fly in the old days. This is what analytics have done to pitching. Maybe it wouldn't fly in the old days, and I do agree with you with that a lot, because guys competed a lot differently, and it was just pitches were used a lot differently, and you would only have the one or two relievers, a setup guy, and then a closer, and then that was it. And you had pitchers going in to the seventh, eighth inning a lot more than you do now, and that's just the way that the game is played now. It's just the way the game is coached at a young age. The way the game, you have pitch limits, you have innings limits, you're getting the third time through the order, or whatever it might be. Pitchers are just used a lot different nowadays, and so it's a lot different for a guy who's only in his second year in the big leagues, because they coddle these guys a little bit more, because their arms are worth how many millions of dollars later on in life. They're not pitching for $250,000 in a pension, right? It's one of those things. These guys are pitching for a long storied career that might be a thing, and you're pitching for that next contract that might be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So you understand why teams don't want to see overused guys, and you also see why pitchers don't want to be overused at this stage in their career. I don't know if George Kirby has had his Tommy John yet, because everyone gets it no matter what. So I'm not sure where it is. It sits there that he's how he's been used or how he's not been used. Like I said, he has a pretty big innings limit pitch, and seems like a bit of a competitor. I was watching some YouTube videos this morning from earlier on this season. He went 8-1 one night, and he was happy. He was excited. He was pumped. He was like an old time pitcher should be when you get to that point in the game. Because the Mariners, like I said, they won how many games in a row at one point? They won 19-20 or whatever it was, that got them into the playoff spot that they're in now, in the wild card spot. And then so you got to think that Kirby is a competitor, and so for Roger Clemens to be popping off like that, I don't know if it was warranted from a guy like Roger Clemens. Like another guy like Jared Weaver, who threw a lot, had a smooth delivery. I like Jared Weaver a lot. He was a competitive kind of guy, but he goes, this is where I'll never be any kind of coach in the big leagues. To be honest, I shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have out there. Come on, man. What the hell? And I'm paraphrasing. He said something different. What the hell? Embarrassing. Apparently, Kirby and Mariners manager Scott Service had a conversation on Saturday where they cleared the air a little bit, and the way it was brought out, that was the Service says that he's a competitive kind of guy, and that Skip has to take the ball out of his hands, and he likes to be out there a lot. But maybe this one of these times where the communication wasn't there between the coach and the manager. They don't like being called coach when they're the manager. Between the manager and the pitcher, or between the pitching coach and the pitcher at this point, because usually that happens, and they know. And for some reason, Scott Service put him out there. These guys are analytics driven. They get it. They 100% know when these guys, where they are in the lineup. Did Service keep them in too long? I don't know. Was Kirby done? I don't know. But was there a conversation that should have been had between innings? Probably, and it obviously couldn't have been had. So that's a situation that was probably just mishandled. In 162 games, you're not going to get every decision right, or every pitching change right, or whatever it might be. And that's why some teams win and some teams lose. And will this game come back to haunt the Mariners? Who knows? Because now they find themselves 2.5 games behind the Houston Astros, and only a half game up on the Texas Rangers, who just can't get it together. And they're lucky the Mariners haven't pulled away, because they've both been 5-5 in their last 10. But the Houston Astros are kind of putting it together now, and Altuve's been one of the driving forces behind that. But it's funny to see how like these things get blown out of proportion this day and age. Because how many years ago, if you had the Seattle Mariners playing the Tampa Bay Rays, it wouldn't even be talked about. No matter if they're in a playoff spot or not. It's one of those things that Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything else, and just the internet itself, how it's changed how people follow sports, because those two teams aren't exactly media darlings on opposite ends of the continent. So it's funny to see how two teams that usually aren't very relevant can become conversations throughout the sports world. But you look at another situation that happened yesterday, just in the Bronx. The New York Yankees were Corbin Burns had no hit. The Yankees threw 8 innings. 0-0 tie. Garrett Cole was just as good. I think he gave up 4 hits. He was pulled in the 7th after 107 pitches. Corbin Burns was at 107 pitches through 8, and he had a no-hitter going. And this is one that I get it to an extent. I don't like it as a fan of baseball and as a baseball dork, I guess you could say. You like to see these guys when they're in a no-hit situation to be able to stay in the game and do something for the fans of their team, for the people in the building. It's one of those parts of forever that you might be, no hitters happen a little more frequently than they used to 10, 20 years ago. But you always, when you're in the building or you're watching on TV and you're seeing something special and the notification comes up. I was at Lloyd Nolan Yard yesterday umpiring some fall baseball, college baseball yesterday, and I was between games. I had games. There was 3 games. I had the middle game off, so I was upstairs in the press box watching the game and everything else. So I was there sitting around up there with a bunch of college age kids who were excited to be watching maybe a no hitter and the like that was going on. And then when Burns struck out the last guy in the 8th inning, I kind of had a feeling that was going to be it for him at 107 pitches. And yes, they did make a pitching change, and which was sad to say, but we'll get to that in half a second. Is that it took away from baseball history, and then it just kind of took away from watching the game anymore. Yeah, there's a combined no-hitter, but those mean absolutely nothing to me. They actually went to the 13th inning. That game went 13th. The whole no-hitter was broke up in the 11th, but by the Yankees. But the Yankees win the game in 13, which kind of stings the Brewers a little bit. But it kind of took the luster off that game, where everybody turned off the notification, turned off their phones because we were watching the Jays game too up there. But one of those things that it takes away from baseball history that the guy's done, and that's it. And I know that the no-hitter doesn't mean a whole bunch to a lot of people anymore, and it doesn't mean a whole bunch to the big picture, because there's not a column in the win and loss column in the stats page in the paper that says how many no-hitters or perfect games that were thrown by your team this year. This stage of the season, you want to get wins, you want to find a way to get wins, and that's the utmost important. They're in a playoff race with the Chicago Cubs, and it's one of those things that you wonder, does that game matter? Will it matter? Does that one game, will it matter later on in the season when they get down to game 161, 162 to see who's going to the National League Central, who's the champion? So it's interesting to see a fan's perspective of how that game is perceived, because it's like I said, as soon as Burns got pulled, that was it. The watching eyes were gone from that game, because the Yankees are out of it, and it's just one of those things that you aren't going to care about that kind of a thing as much with the no-hitter situation when it's a third and fourth guy in there. And then the thing that got me was after every guy they went in after Burns, they went to another arm and another arm and another arm and another arm. And I've always said, if you go to the well too many times and you have 4 and 5 pitchers that going in there, eventually human beings are going to screw things up, because if you give a human being an opportunity to screw things up, that's what they do. Human beings screw things up. Computers don't, human beings do. And so if you keep giving the ball to somebody else and somebody else all the time, it's just a law of averages. It says that next guy isn't going to be as good. So you wonder why they would go to a new guy every inning. And I know you got relievers, you got this guy and that guy and setup guy, and you hope the game finishes into the 10th, 11th, 12th inning. It goes to 13. And then what do you do? Because you want to save arms for later on this week and later on in the season, as you're getting into September, mid-September, last push the last 3 weeks of the season. It's over 3 weeks yesterday. So you wonder how it just is all going to turn out, why you would pull a guy when he's at that situation, or not leave a reliever in for that second inning. It's kind of an odd thing. Like, are you trying to preserve the no-hitter, or aren't you? Are you trying to win the game, or aren't you? It was odd to me that they kept pulling pitchers over and over and over again and going to a new guy every night. Yes, these guys probably had a lot of rest. The series wasn't much with the Yankees and the Brewers this weekend, Old Timers Day. We'll talk about that maybe on Wednesday. We'll do a Yankee week in review. But it's kind of odd that they would keep going to a new pitcher every half inning and find a new guy, and how the Brewers ended up losing that game, a game they probably should have won earlier on. But it's just odd that the way the pitchers are used nowadays, they kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth, as I am here, saying one side's good and one side's bad, and how you don't really know what's going on with pitching staffs, and how and maybe a guy gets used too long, maybe a guy gets pulled too soon. But every team has their analytics, every team has their guy, and how they analyze around these analytics. I think the one thing that really has to change throughout baseball a lot, and every team uses analytics, some just have better analytics guys than others, but I think that one thing that's really really lost in the game of baseball. And I think this can go more so for guys my age and older, maybe a little bit, and maybe some younger guys too. But the feel of the game of baseball isn't really there anymore, and they're reading the book too much. And you can't put you can't put feel on paper. You can't put feel in a keyboard. You have to get to there's an eye test that goes on with these guys, and maybe that's what Scott Service had on Friday night when he had his pitcher out there, George Kirby. You know what? I think he's only at 90 pitches. Yeah, he's been dominant all game long. I can go with this guy and see what happens. Maybe after the double, he should have pulled Kirby, and then he wouldn't have given up the 2-run home run. Who knows? It's just odd that it went that way. And then you go the other side of things where the eye test had to have been there with Corbin Burns and the Milwaukee Brewers, where Craig Counsell decided to pull his guy with a no-hitter, the no-hit going in the ninth. Do you let him go for one pitcher? It was a 0-0 game, right? So it's just like, and that game was the utmost importance to the Brewers. Like both games meant a lot to both teams, a lot. And it's just funny how analytics went one way for one team and one way the other way. It's always just a funny thing how pitchers are used and how they're just used differently. Like people were trying to compare the George Kirby getting pulled on Friday night to Pedro Martinez getting pulled in 2003 in that great Game 7 with the Yankees when Aaron Boone hit the home run and on it goes. But you can't really compare the two because Martinez was at 130 and he got kept in 130 or 140 pitches, whatever it was, and he thought he was coming out and he got put out there. Then he got pulled halfway through the inning like Burns, like George Kirby did. So you can't really compare the two, the moments of everything else. Like you can compare like the gist of it, I guess, a little bit, but to try to compare a Friday night in Tampa with the Mariners in September to whatever day of the week it was back in 2003 with online the ALCS when the rivalry meant something. They get going again tonight back down in Boston. And we'll get off the baseball thing in here in half a second. We'll get to birthdays, but how Major League Baseball hasn't figured it out on the anniversary of 9/11, those terrible tragedies that happened in New York City and across the United States and at the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania, how the Major League Baseball hasn't figured it out. The Yankees and the Mets should be playing in New York tonight or this afternoon or whatever it might be. How they don't get that right, and how the Yankees are in Boston, and it doesn't make sense to me. Those two teams should be playing every year. Save one of those Subway Series games for today, and just make sure that happens on September 11th every year. It's going to be one that you remember for. We'll get to that in half a second. I don't know why baseball can't get out of their own way and figure that one out. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, pitching's going to be like you want to save your arms. You want to keep guys going. You want to keep guys healthy down the stretch run. You don't know how long your season's going to be. Every game is of the utmost important. Wins are important. So do you use pitchers longer? Who knows? Do you pull them sooner? Who knows? I don't think you should ever be pulling your starter in the third or fourth or fifth inning because like I said, you got to finish the game off. Pitchers have become more innings eaters than wins and losses. The wins don't even matter to starting pitchers anymore. It's duration of games that they get into. It's their how many strikeouts they can amass. You'd think that they would think about getting away from strikeouts, get more ground balls, get the games over quicker because you need more pitches to get strikeouts, right? That's just simple math of how that goes. A one pitch out to me is better than the 3-pitch strikeout. That's just simple math and to save your arm long term and everything else. But so it's odd how pitching has regressed that way a little bit and how games go a little bit longer because of how many strikeouts there are. It's going to be interesting how it all pans out in the next few weeks. Those Houston Astros, they aren't going away. Like I said, they're 2.5 up on the Mariners right now, and you got to see they're going to fly away. But, man, that Atlanta Braves team is getting there something else. We'll talk about that all tomorrow morning at 14:20 in the morning. Anyways, here is our Rourke sponsors at SeatGeek.
The foul baller. If there's a ball that's gone foul, he's gone to get it. Under his watchful gaze, all bevs, binoculars, and ballpark brats are safe. He's the only thing that stands between his section and certain destruction. That's why he only trusts SeatGeek with his tickets. The ticketing app trusted by fans. SeatGeek, so fans can fan.
All right, birthdays, and on this day in Sports history brought to us again by SeatGeek. Thank you very much, SeatGeek, for being a sponsor, longtime sponsor of the 1420 Sports Bar podcast, brought to you by SeatGeek. Anyways, on this day in 1985, Pete Rose of the Cincinnati Reds got a career hit 4,192 off Eric Show of the San Diego Padres, eclipsing Ty Cobbs' record of 4,191 in the Reds' 2-0 win over the Padres in front of 47,237 fans at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati. Rose went 2 for 3 that night, including a triple to increase his batting average to 267 on the season. Rose would play one more year in the big leagues, where he would get 52 more hits to bring his career total of 4,256 total, a whopping 1,097 ahead of the only active player on the top 20 list, Tigers legend Miguel Cabrera. So just goes to show the greatness of Pete Rose over the years. Too bad he got into the all the trouble he's been in over the years, and Pete Rose can't get out of his own ways, but he's still the hit king. So congratulations to Pete Rose on this day in 1985 with the Major League Baseball hit record of 4,192. And happy 43rd birthday to retired NHLer and former Mr. Hilary Duff, Mike Comrie. Comrie played in parts of 10 NHL seasons with stops in Edmonton, Phoenix, Ottawa, the Islanders, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. Comrie amassed 168 goals with 197 assists for 365 points in a rather bleak career plus minus of minus 49. But Mr. Hilary Duff, and his dad owns the Brick franchise here in Canada. So Mr. Comrie, he was going to be doing okay in the old pocketbook, no matter if he had an NHL career or not. I liked him as an Oiler. He came out of the Kootenay Ice and had a heck of a little run there in Edmonton as a youngster in his hometown Oilers. So it's one of those things that Comrie just couldn't get out of his own way a little bit. Feisty player, I think concussions and stuff got the best of him too. But he was a good player, not a great player. He had some moments of greatness as we're watching here on YouTube and everything else. But anyways, we'll be remiss to mention this. It's one of those days that we everybody knows who's my age and old, like Jimmy Valentine, our producer of the show. He wasn't even born when the 9/11 tragedies happened back in 2001. But anybody else who was around that day and remembers exactly what happened and exactly their thoughts and being glued to your TV for the entire day and then the days on end after that, and the terror that amassed New York City and right across the country, it was the world has changed ever since that day. There's been so much, not just getting onto airplanes, but just the everything. How everything has changed since that day, right across not only Canada, but the United States as well, United States and Canada as well, and right across the world. But it's a sad day. I've been down to the 9/11 memorial a few times, and it's touching to see, and it's a very eerie, but it's it's just an odd spot. The sereneness, the quietness that's around there, and just how nobody says anything. There was one time a few years back when I was there, and there was a firehouse right across the street where all the members of that firehouse, all the firemen and people who worked there, firemen and women who worked in that called that place home. They all perished in the World Trade Center that day. And there was a man telling his story about what happened that day at when he's coming out of the World Trade Center, and how a fireman got him to, he's kind of a bigger guy, and how a fireman carried this guy down the stairs and got him to safety. And then the fireman went back up and was never seen again. So there's all kinds of stories that would be on TV all day today. But if whoever remembers that, just remember that, to put life in perspective, and all this stuff that we do, talking about sports and then complaining about your team, it don't really matter. It's for entertainment, it's for fun. And to remember days like today, how the world changed for the worse on 9/11, and the people that perished in not only at the World Trade Center, but at the Pentagon and at the in Pennsylvania as well. So there's a lot bigger things in life than the scores of a football game or a baseball game or a hockey game, and to put things in perspective and not lose light of all that kind of stuff that happens on a daily basis. It's a lot more important than the sports world that we tend to love so much and tend to hold at such a high regard. But anyways, here's a 1420 toast to all the people who perished that day and all the people who helped out, the survivors and everything else. So here's a toast to the people of New York City, because it's a touching moment. There's something you'll never forget, no matter where you are, and on it goes. But anyways, there it is for 1420 in the morning. Make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel. Talk to people about the show, like we always say. Go to we have the we'll put it up there in the show's notes today. We have a merchandise page. You can go get your 1420 and Hey Blue and 1420 in the morning swag, I guess, to help support the show as well. And make sure you guys, follow our YouTube channel and talk to people about the show. It's very important to help keep trying to grow this thing. I don't know if we're going to get to the Southern Alberta Sports Report this week. Might be a next week thing. Got some problems, not problems, just some details with the sponsors, I guess, before we get this thing going. We want to make sure we have it right before we release it. But anyways, that's at 14:20 in the morning for this September 11th, 2023, 22 years after the tragedy and everything else. But make sure you go and hug your loved ones today, and always remember, it doesn't matter where you are, it's who you're with. Have a good day, folks, and we'll talk to you later on tonight.
You just listened to the 1420 Sports Bar Podcast. 4 beer with sports talking a whole lot more. We are part of the Belly Up Media Network. Let's get into it.